The following presentation is a gift from the team at Streamline Publishing, publishers of Fine Art Connoisseur, Plein Air Magazine, and weekly newsletters Fine Art Today, Realism Today, Plein Air Today, and American Watercolor, and events, the Plein Air Convention and the Figurative Art Convention. We offer over 400 different art instruction tutorials and ultra high-quality video by the world's leading artists. If you like what you see, help us support our artists and our team with your purchase. Each video aired has a special discount code for today only in the comments section with a link to the video offered. And to see everything we do, or if you want to receive notice of new releases, new products, and new events for artists, simply click the other link, which says, "See everything we do." Thank you.
So what exactly is this global virtual painting event called Plein Air Live? Well, first, it's kind of like our Plein Air convention. It's people like you who are interested in growth, working on themselves and on their painting and how you show up in the world.
This year's amazing faculty includes the incredible Jill Carver, landscape legend Scott Christensen, the incomparable Kevin McPherson, Kathryn Stats, Joe Paquette, and many more to come.
Let's make our own personal growth a priority and be one as a plein air community worldwide. Hi there, I'm Eric Rhodes, publisher of Fine Art Connoisseur and Plein Air magazines. We are trying to help you grow and learn during these interesting times, and we've pulled in some of our classics. This one from Kathryn Stats. It's called Overview of Mountain Scenery. Enjoy.
Hello, I'm Kathryn Stats, and today I'm going to be painting a subject matter from southern Utah, right outside of Zion Park. Some of the formations in the painting will be inside the park. I like to paint there. It's beautiful morning, evening, and it has great patterns. I think it's important to love your subject and be excited enough about it to want to solve the problems that it presents. But after you fall in love, it's time to back off and get down to the business of the technicalities of making that work. So I think I'll start by showing you the subject. I was taken by the large shadow shapes that work so beautifully against the shadow shapes. That work so beautifully against these highlight shapes. This is morning. This mountain is called Mount Kenesaba, and we have West Temple inside the Zion Park over here. That's pretty much all I have to say about that. I'm going to try to approximate this painting, but make it better. That will be the test. By the way, as well as my study, I'm using a reference from a digital shot that was actually scanned from a slide. So the color is off, and that's not particularly important because I've painted there so many times and I know what I want. I'll use the painted study for the color reference, and then the digital reference, which is on my computer and also on this larger screen, will help me with what is actually there and give me some seeds of ideas that I'd like to build on that are not in the study. For this preparation, I understained my canvas with a red oxide transparent, very thin, and wiped off to give a warm cast. This isn't always a good idea, but lately I've been painting too pastel, and so it helps tone me toward a warmer color and hopefully, keep me from painting too pale, using too much white. Sometimes I paint too dark, then I go to a straight white canvas, and that's very helpful. And another really good way to work is to stain an area, a color field, as you go. so that it'll have a chance to stain. By stain, I mean use a good quality paint thinner so it can evaporate by the time you get to the actual part that you're using. Going to start with the large shapes. I also, because I don't think it's a good idea to have to sit and watch me struggle with my drawing. So I've already blocked in some drawings here, marked the major junctions, places where things hit, so nothing is in the center, and it looks good on the canvas. So forgive me for not. Well, you'll thank me actually that you don't have to watch that struggle. Now I'm going to switch to the palette, and the palette I'm using, I have a standard palette with variations, let's put it that way. I start with a fairly simple palette, a warm and a cool of every color for the most part. Then I add or subtract extra colors based on what I found that works that day. This is not written in stone. Ultramarine blue, cobalt blue, cerulean blue, titanium white, lemon yellow, CAD-YELLOW light, CAD-YELLOW deep, yellow ochre, CAD orange, cadmium red light, permanent red, alizarin crimson, quinacridone violet, Indian red, red oxide transparent, burnt sienna. These colors are placed where they are. It should be yellow running through yellow to green, through the warm blues to the cool blues, this way running through the oranges to the reds, rounding the corner, coming back toward blue, any violets. These colors I don't have a place because I've started using them later. The important thing is to always have your colors in the same place so you don't have to be thinking and searching. So that's the deal there. Sometimes I'll use a phthalo green or a viridian green over here. Phthalo mixes well with the red oxide transparent for, say, a stain to go in the dark part of a tree, a mauve violet. So I don't always use that. I don't always use Indian red, but I'm going to show you how you can get a lovely violet with Indian red, ultramarine blue, and actually the three, and yellow ochre. So this is really all red, yellow, and blue. Just pick your reds, your yellows, and your blues. See how they work together. I'm always picking up a new color and running home and tinting it out and mixing it to see how it behaves, because my mind gets stupid and it starts mixing the same things every time. The problem isn't, gee, can I mix that color again? It's, oh, please don't mix the same color again. Because I think they're more interesting if they're working off of each other rather than always trying to match exactly. The color that I mixed here is cobalt blue and the quinacridone red and some white. This, I use it to control some colors. It works well in shadows. It cools some things. It darkens some things. And I like to look at it because it practically glows in the dark. It's a pretty color, but it's not there to please us. So you can go either as blue or as cool as you want or as warm as you want in this. Okay, so I keep it over there to gray things. Another good gray to be using is ultramarine blue and your regular cadmium orange. It's a nice warmer gray. That you can mix your grays. You can buy your grays. But let's don't forget to use our grays. For years I didn't use grays because I didn't see them. And my gosh, it's what makes color work. If you want a bright color, adding more bright to the side of it, it just gets hotter and hotter. But you throw a little gray in there and it really does sing. The canvas I'm using is a Clausen 66 mounted on a half-inch gator board. And I buy these from a company in Utah, Source Tech also in Scottsdale, furnishes them. You can buy, you need to use gator board. I ship a lot, and it's lightweight, and it doesn't ripple or shrink or fit in a frame badly like stretched linen does. I like it a little nubby. I don't tend to have a wonderful brush stroke that excites me, so I like the more coarse canvas. so my brushes will skip across the grain and be a little more toothy and soft-edged. Also, I don't mix any thinner with my paint unless it's of such a stiff nature it needs to be brought down to a buttery texture. I'm going to start with my darks. If I were to, you have several choices, of course. I like more of a transparent dark. In this case, I'm not going to thin it to make it transparent. I'm simply going to apply thick paint thinly with a heavy hand. That way, it'll pick up the next layer of paint rather than, it'll pull the next layer of paint off my brush rather than jump onto my brush to make things dirty. So I'm going to start with my dark, large shapes and get the shapes in, get the 5 or 6 big shapes in and worked together so that the aerial perspective and the patterns are working well before I move to smaller areas. You should paint large to small anyway and thin to thick. We'll see how that works. Okay, we're ready to start painting. I'm mixing a gray violet for my large shapes, for my major large distant shape. And I'm struggling around here to get the right value. It's not matching this, but I think I want to start darker and then work up to this. So I'm going for the large shape. I'm going for not thinned paint. It's going to be applied with a heavy hand, scrubby heavy hand, because that will give me a surface on top of which I can apply more paint easily. So, I dipped into some CAD red light, not that, it's a warmer red light than I in these lights than I was happy with, so then I went to alizarin crimson, some of this cobalt violet and quinacridone violet, and white. And if I were to warm this up, I would probably stick a little more orange or red light in it. But for now, I think I'll stay on the cooler side because it should be back there. In fact, it looks pretty dark once I get it up here. And also, you know, I scrub and I go like this, but in the end, it needs to have a vertical sense to it so that we don't get the glare of the stroke and think that it's a different value altogether. I wouldn't be taking notes if I were you because this stuff changes with every painting. Do you ever start a painting and wonder, oh my gosh, let me see, how do we put paint on canvas again? You know, the discussion is, should it be thin, should it be transparent, and ordinarily transparent darks are great. And sometimes we'll do it that way, but on this painting, not. I want to compare these values of distant mountains. So they'll be lighter and grayer. I'm going to go for lighter and see, just lighter and see what happens here. We can always gray later. Well, that's not true, but we can always do something later if it doesn't work. Nope. This is a very thin, very scratchy lay-on because I'm going to be cutting back in with the lighter colors. Remember, right now we're just working with the large shapes. Try not to get lost in the minutiae because then you're really in trouble. I'm saying that more to remind myself than you. I'm warming this large shape as I move down the mountain simply because it is a different layer. It's just occurred to me to practice what I preach and use a larger brush. I've been messing around with this number 6. I use flat bristles mainly. I have a selection of synthetics that work like bristles that I'm very happy with as well. Sometimes a soft something or other. What's this called? A royal sable. Doesn't look like sable, but anyway. It's a really good one to soften and also to scrub around on some things, but mainly it's a flat bristle. I think I'll switch to a number 10 for heaven's sake, and remix some paint. I'll work on this large shape here as well as the dark trees. I'm going to get this dark foreground mesa in shadow and also my dark green trees. I think the trees will go in first, so I'll have something to work against. What I'm trying to set up here is an atmospheric effect. Once you paint light, it's hard to get your darks back. So I'm working darker to lighter, cooler to warmer. It's not a steadfast theory that you must always follow no matter what, but I think I'm safer getting these shapes and tones on, values on, and then applying, color correcting and temperature correcting as I go, and it will tend to lighten things as I go. Otherwise, you just really won't get those darks back. I'm mixing my own greens. Sometimes I use green out of a tube, but rarely to mix a green with. And right now I'm experimenting. This was the ultramarine blue initially, and putting the ochre in was a mistake. Or maybe not. I'm looking for something warmer than a green. So I'm going to use the red oxide transparent, the ultramarine blue, and see what happens here. It's probably a little black. Maybe I do need to have more red. You know what's wrong with that red? It's a permanent red, and it's not as alizarin as I would like, so I'll switch alizarins. Pretty black. Try not to go all the way dark as one can be. even though it's tempting, because that'll drop a big dark hole in your painting. Again, I'm going to apply this thinly with a heavy, scratchy hand. Oh, I changed my mind. I think what we need to get some of these, we need to have it a little more easy to use here. That's very thick paint. I'm lightening and graying some of these darks as well. They're looking a little black. Well, you can always go lighter. Sometimes it's hard to claw your way back up out of the blackness. Good to get rid of that awful color over here. Get back into the land of the lovely violets. I need a sense of distance behind these trees for this mesa. I also need it to be darker. The darkest parts to be darker and warmer than what's back here, just for a sense of aerial perspective. And it's a bit of a rub, because on my video, you can see that in the shadow, in the higher parts of these shadows, they go pretty light, but actually never as light as they're going to end up back here. Keeps it all forward. I've also widened this gap between the rocks on the left and the background because I think it's an interesting part of the painting and an important part of the design. Oops. Get the paint on, work it later, is what I'm doing now. That's my excuse. I'm trying with warmer and cooler colors, but basically I'm just trying to get the paint on, and then I'll deal with edges and form later. Doing some drawing. What do they call that? Rendering? I just learned that word last year. I was pretty proud of myself because rendering is something we do. I like the balance, the tension between the warm and the cool. It gives your eye a reason to look at it. I'd better be careful not to get too cool back there. I'm using this little brush to get the vertical going. Okay, let's see. We better get these these shapes in. And then, if we don't do the sky, we could be very, very sorry. So it's basically working your shapes in your relationships probably about a couple of different times around to get all that straight before you move on to anything else. And it's tempting to jump right into those lights. I'm going to resist the urge. We have no idea what we've got there yet, do we? Let's see what this is. It's nothing. Try to keep my dirty whites separate from my clean whites. It's hardly ever successful, but I can try. I'm struggling here with this dark shape. Well, this is completely wrong. It's too green. But there's a dark shape coming up here I want to separate, although it's part of a whole, whole section. So I'm tending to get a little lost in the minutia. But I think that's better than pretending to know what I'm doing and getting it wrong. This is, it's not a system here. It's see what works. But in keeping with my lecture about getting the big shapes in, maybe I will flatten it out. Get this whole thing in here as a, let me see, a medium warm. Medium warm might be the thing we need here. I think I'll do that. So that was orange into some of this violet business. By now I could not tell you exactly how I got to that, but it's, you know, some of this violet business. Ultramarine blue, alizarin crimson, and some of the quinacridone violet and cobalt. And actually, this is the fun part. It's problem solving. And you can't go wrong. It's just paint. And by the way, you have to just paint miles and miles of canvas before you're going to be feeling good about much of anything anyway. And you might as well enjoy the process. Because it's always a process. I don't think you ever get there. I'm constantly having to pull these brush strokes vertically so you don't get the glare and assume they're horizontal planes. We'll take care of that later, the horizontal business. Well, right now we could name this painting Big Purple and just be quite fine with it. I'm trying to get the relationship to become, you know, a little warmer as we come down here. I'm going to get these in now, these little interesting shadow areas, and they are warmer. They're warm like this. So where did I come up with that from? Oh, that's it, okay. Be nice if I mixed up enough paint, but I don't ever know what it's going to be. It's so magic out here in the desert. These horizontals are so important. You know, it's really triangles and horizontals and flat planes. But those little shelves of red rock are wonderful. They're marvelous for what they do to a landscape. That'll work. That drops off there. I'm not going to talk for a minute. Kind of like a paint by number puzzle. I've always been impressed with those, you know, the concept. I'm really going off of the video monitor rather than the study because there's not enough information in the study. There we go. Pretty close value, but trying to change the temperature in the different sections of these planes, of these color fields. That'll work. Try not to name what you're painting. It's just shapes. If you give it a name, it sort of messes things up. It's just shape and value and temperature. Try not to get too colorful. Joke. Purples are pretty wild in my lights, actually. We'll tone down some of the darks later, too. But I want to save my good stuff for up in this area right here. The good stuff, yes. Honest, I swear, I'm going to get the sky in. Just let me get down to here, because it can be a real problem if I don't get that sky in soon, and it will change all of this. Okay, I'm going to mix up my colors for the sky. I cleaned up my paint, and I like for a sky to use this permanent red and the CAD lemon, and I mix up a tint of both of those colors to add to my ultramarine blue. Another good desert sky is cobalt blue. But I think we'll do the ultramarine, and if we have to get into the cobalt, I certainly will. I read a watercolor artist statement at his funeral. He was a great watercolor artist, and he said, if you want a good blue, mix them all together. And I found that that's a pretty good idea sometimes. But we don't want an Easter egg sky, so I'll try to control that behavior. This permanent red mixes up a little cleaner because it doesn't have as much orange in it as the CAD red. Then I mix them together and hope something comes out of it. I'll tell you, sometimes this stuff talks better than it mixes too. Oh, that's a bigger sky than I remember looking at. Maybe I would better pick a little more up here while the Army's here. Better to have too much. And I like putting on a sky on a tinted canvas. It gives me something to look at. It doesn't seem to look so anemic. On the other hand, in some paintings, I'll want to leave the sky till the very end to put it in. But this is important that we get it in now so we can have something to tell her. So I can be reminded how very wrong this all went to start with, probably. Hope not. Different brands have different lemons and cadmiums, and it doesn't really matter. Just pick what makes you happy. It all needs to be experimented with anyway. Okay, I guess I'll quit talking and commit. I'm going to put it on with a knife and then work it around because it's just so much faster. Light's coming from over here, so I'll make more light. So much easier to control paint if you have enough paint to control. My tendency when I'm nervous or unfamiliar with my subject is to use less, under the false illusion that you're controlling it more with less paint. And even though I know intellectually that it doesn't work that way, the more paint, the better control, I still fall back into my old pathology of not using enough paint. So we have plenty here to push around. You don't want to mix with the paint that's the darker paint, roll your brush toward it. I need to walk back. After all, it is the sky that's dropping down into these shadows that will ultimately affect them. If we consider the sky a batch of dust particles, which it is basically, we have more sky between our eye and here than we do our eye and here, and so on and so forth, depending on the general, the local color and plane of the object itself. The idea is to get rid of the canvas, so I guess I better work on that. I think I'll put these rocks in next. Clean up the sky paint. I think I'll keep it around though. I need it later when mixing lighter tones for the shadows. Trying to mix up a darker rock shadow color. I don't have a good reference for them. I don't like the ones that are here. So I'll just have to, I might have to go through my file on my computer and get some other ones. Because there is nothing I make up that is worth viewing. I know the longer you paint, the better you get at faking that sort of thing, but it basically looks made up when I make it up. Whoever said you can't mix brown with primary colors? My problem is getting brown more often than I'd like. Let's try this and see what happens. Yes, I'll be quiet for a minute because I have to really think hard when I'm just making something up. I'm mostly working out of my head. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just use this for value, and I'm going to find a better reference at a later time to make this a legitimate outcropping. I've gone all over the place and got a whole file full of this stuff. So that's what I think I'll do. I'm searching for a value and color for the lighting behind these mesas. And I think, if anything, push it. To something delightful, we'll hope. What did I say about starting dark and moving light? I think I need to work on getting these dark shadows and accents in, which I'll do. During the break, I decided that making up that rock cliff was not the plan. So I searched through my computer for some reference of something. While I won't use it exactly as we see it over here, I'll certainly be using the colors, the values, the rim light, and it will give me something more to go on than I was using before. So I wiped it off. This is oil primed linen, and it wipes easily. So I wiped a bit off, and we'll go from there and see what happens. This may not work. I'm using Indian red, yellow ochre. Yes. Then I'm switching to CAD red light and yellow ochre. See if I can get a glow going. Well, maybe I shouldn't promise things I can't deliver. It's one of those deals where you have to work back and forth, where I have to work back and forth to get a solution going. I think we might get somewhere if I'm not impatient. We'll have to do some relationships So I'll move on. I'm going to have this rim show above and behind this mesa so they don't run right into one another. I think I can do that. We forgot to talk about establishing your center of interest with your horizon line. It would be eye level. So that cliff I was using, the rock face I was using to do this side, was out of whack because you were looking down on it. Oh, the shadows. My question is now, if I want to just hit that with the bright, or if I want to make it be that lovely tone that's in there, grayer, a little more green grayer, and then pop it on top. I think the value is probably more important than the color, but it's still a good question to be asking. This is the kind of thing where I'll, in my studio, sit across the room for hours and think about, but it doesn't help a lot, but sometimes you come up with answers. And sometimes you just have to paint it. You have to paint thousands of miles of this stuff, of this canvas, before you get a better sense. And then all you're doing is improving your batting average. It doesn't all work out. Watching this sort of thing is probably like watching paint dry, but I have to work through it and not just give up and start scrubbing around and hoping, oh well, I'll deal with it later. Although that's really tempting. Well, I think that's enough fiddling around on that for a while. We'll let it, fester? See if it gets better or worse. It'll speak to me later. I don't think it's a good idea to get locked into one area so that you're so focused you forget that it's a part of the organic whole. So I'm going to move on, keep covering canvas. This is the next little challenge because it's not a resolved issue with me. And then I'll start adjusting values and edges. Hello, I'm Kathryn Stats, and today I'm going to be painting a subject matter from southern Utah, right outside of Zion Park. Some of the formations in the painting will be inside the park. I like to paint there. It's beautiful morning, evening, and it has great patterns. I think it's important to love your subject and be excited enough about it to want to solve the problems that it presents. But after you fall in love, it's time to back off and get down to the business of the technicalities of making that work. So I think I'll start by showing you the subject. I was taken by the large shadow shapes that work so beautifully against these highlight shapes. This is morning. This mountain is called Mount Kenesaba, and we have West Temple inside the Zion Park over here. That's pretty much all I have to say about that. I'm going to try to approximate this painting, but make it better. That will be the test. By the way, as well as my study, I'm using a reference from a digital shot that was actually scanned from a slide. So the color is off, and that's not particularly important because I've painted there so many times and I know what I want. I'll use the painted study for the color reference, and then the digital reference, which is on my computer and also on this larger screen, will help me with what is actually there and give me some seeds of ideas that I'd like to build on that are not in the study. Let's see how that works. Remember, right now we're just working with the large shapes. Try not to get lost in the minutia because then you're really in trouble. I'm saying that more to remind myself than you. After all, it is the sky that's dropping down into these shadows that will ultimately affect them. If we consider the sky a batch of dust particles, which it is basically, we have more sky between our eye and here than we do our eye and here, and so on and so forth, depending on the general, the local color and plane of the object itself. See how well this paint sits on top of the other paint? You get a better soft edge that way. Okay, it looks like we can really do some lightening up in these lighter planes. I want to keep them cooler in this painting than I did in this one. The shame of it is that I didn't see the proper value to start with. The more times you have to go over the painting, sometimes the more it decreases its intensity. But I think we lucked out with that mass up there being the proper value when it looked truly dark in the beginning of this painting and it's been not touched. This painting, any painting, I could work on for months. And I do intend, when it's dry and I get back to my studio, to do some refining and touching up of it. Things that are so small that I don't think they would translate to the video camera. But it is something that I could rework and rework until what ends up happening is that you just change things and not improve them. So I think I'll quit while I'm ahead, and I've thoroughly enjoyed doing this and hope to see you again. Thank you.
That was Kathryn Stats, an overview of mountain scenery. You can learn more about that at lilyartvideo.com. And remember, we have a special discount code in the comments section for today only. Thanks for watching. I'm Eric Rhodes.